The morning sun felt too bright for such a terrible day. Helen stood on the sidewalk outside First National Bank, holding a piece of paper that would change everything. The words foreclosure notice were printed in bold letters at the top, but she had read them so many times they barely made sense anymore. 42 years old, and this is where life had brought her. 6 months ago, she was Mrs. Helen Carter, wife of 20 years to Michael, a man who made her laugh every single day. They had their little white house with the blue shutters, a small garden where she grew tomatoes, and dreams of maybe taking that trip to Europe they always talked about. Then cancer came knocking. It started with Michael feeling tired all the time. "Just getting old," he would joke, ruffling her hair as he passed by her in the kitchen. But when the tiredness turned into weight loss and the weight loss turned into doctor visits, their perfect little world began to crack. The treatments were expensive. Insurance covered some of it, but not enough. Never enough. Helen had quit her job at the flower shop to take care of Michael full-time. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself they would figure it out. She told herself a lot of things that turned out to be wrong. Michael fought for 18 months. He fought so hard that sometimes Helen forgot he was sick. On his good days, he would sit in their garden and tell her stories about his childhood, about his dreams for their future, about how much he loved her. On his bad days, she would hold his hand and pretend she wasn't scared. He died on a Tuesday morning in March, just as their daffodils were starting to bloom. The bills came after the funeral. Stacks and stacks of them. Helen had tried to work with the hospitals, tried to set up payment plans, tried to sell everything she could, but medical debt doesn't wait for grief to pass. The house they had bought as newlyweds, where they had painted every room together and fixed every broken pipe, was going to be sold to pay for treatments that couldn't save her husband anyway. Helen folded the foreclosure notice and put it in her purse next to her last $20 bill. She had nowhere to go. No children to call, no close family left. Michael had been her everything, and now everything was gone. Across town, Robert Mitchell was having his own terrible morning. He stood in his kitchen, staring at 3 bowls of soggy cereal that his kids had barely touched. 8-year-old Annie sat at the table in her school uniform, braiding and unbraiding her brown hair. She did that when she was worried. The twins, 6-year-old Ben and Lily, were supposed to be getting ready for school. Instead, Ben was under the kitchen table making airplane noises, and Lily was spinning in circles until she got dizzy. They did that when they were upset. "Dad, what are we going to do about Grandma Rose?" Annie asked quietly. She always asked the hard questions. This little girl who had grown up too fast since her mother died 2 years ago. Robert ran his hand through his hair. His mother-in-law, Rose, had been living with them since his wife passed away. She had been everything: cook, cleaner, babysitter, homework helper, and the closest thing to a mother his children had known in their short lives. Yesterday, she had fallen down the porch steps and broken her hip. The doctor said she would need surgery and months of recovery in a special care facility. "We'll figure it out, sweetheart," Robert said, but he had no idea how. Running the Mitchell Ranch was a full-time job on its own. He had 300 head of cattle, 50 acres of hayfields, and equipment that always seemed to break down at the worst possible moment. His wife, Catherine, had been the one who managed everything else: the house, the kids, the meals, the schedules. After she died, Rose had stepped in without being asked. She had held their family together with homemade cookies and bedtime stories and endless patience. Now what? "I don't want Grandma Rose to go away," Lily said, stopping her spinning to look at her father with big, scared eyes. "She's not going away forever," Robert said, kneeling down to hug his daughter. "She just needs to get better first." But even as he said it, he knew things would never be the same. Rose was 78 years old. Even after she healed, would she really be able to chase after twins and help with homework and cook dinner every night? And what about right now? He couldn't leave 3 young children alone while he worked on the ranch. He couldn't afford to hire someone full-time. He barely had enough money to keep the ranch running as it was. Mrs. Patterson said her mom might be able to help sometimes, Annie offered. Mrs. Patterson was Annie's teacher, a kind woman who had been trying to help the family in small ways since Catherine died. "That's nice of her," Robert said, "but Mrs. Patterson's mom has her own family to worry about." The school bus honked outside, saving him from having to come up with more answers he didn't have. "Come on, guys," he said. "School time." He watched from the window as his 3 children climbed onto the yellow bus. Annie made sure the twins found seats together. She always took care of them, just like she tried to take care of him. It wasn't fair for an 8-year-old to carry so much worry. Robert had been thinking about selling the ranch. The idea made his stomach hurt, but what choice did he have? This land had been in his family for 3 generations. His grandfather had built the original farmhouse with his own hands. His father had expanded the cattle operation and added the hay fields. Robert had always planned to pass it all down to his children someday. But what good was land if he couldn't take care of his family? He poured himself another cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table where his children had eaten breakfast. Or tried to eat breakfast. The soggy cereal reminded him of all the things he was doing wrong. Catherine would have made them pancakes or scrambled eggs. She would have packed their lunches with little notes. She would have braided Annie's hair properly and convinced Ben to wear matching socks. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. "Robert? It's Pastor Williams from the church." Robert had been going to Cedar Ridge Community Church since he was a boy. Pastor Williams had married him and Catherine, baptized all 3 of his children, and spoken at Catherine's funeral. He was a good man who genuinely cared about his congregation. "Morning, Pastor. How can I help you?" "Actually, I was hoping I could help you. I heard about Rose's accident." "How are you managing?" Robert almost laughed, but not because anything was funny. "I'm not, to be honest. I have no idea what I'm going to do." "Well, that's why I'm calling. There's a woman in our community who might be able to help. She's going through a difficult time herself, and I thought maybe you two could help each other out." "What do you mean?" "Her name is Helen Carter. She recently lost her husband, and she needs a place to stay. She's a good woman, Robert. Kind and responsible. I was thinking maybe she could help with the children and the house in exchange for room and board." Robert was quiet for a long moment. He had never considered bringing a stranger into their home. What would the children think? What would people say? But then he thought about Annie trying to take care of everyone, about the twins eating soggy cereal for breakfast, about the ranch that might have to be sold if he couldn't find a way to make everything work. "I don't know, Pastor. I mean, I appreciate the thought, but just think about it," Pastor Williams said gently, "and maybe pray about it. Sometimes God puts people in our lives exactly when we need them most." After hanging up, Robert sat in his quiet kitchen and thought about Helen Carter, whoever she was. Could a stranger really become part of their family? Could someone who didn't even know them care about his children the way they needed to be cared for? Outside his window, the cattle were grazing peacefully in the morning sun. The hayfield stretched out green and healthy. This was a good place, a place worth fighting for. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to save it all. Maybe sometimes the answer to your prayers comes in a form you never expected. Helen had been staying at the church shelter for 3 days when she overheard the conversation that would change everything. She was folding donated clothes in the small room behind the sanctuary when Pastor Williams came in with 2 other church members, Mrs. Chen and Mr. Rodriguez. They were talking quietly, but their voices carried in the empty space. "Poor Robert," Mrs. Chen was saying. "Those children have been through so much already, and now with Rose in the hospital." "He's trying so hard," Pastor Williams replied. "But I don't know how he's going to manage the ranch and take care of 3 kids on his own." Helen kept folding clothes, trying not to listen, but their conversation pulled at something deep in her chest. "What about hiring someone?" Mr. Rodriguez suggested. "With what money?" Mrs. Chen shook her head. "The ranch barely breaks even as it is. Robert's been pouring everything into keeping it running since Catherine passed." Helen had heard about the Mitchell family before. Everyone in Cedar Ridge knew their story. The young rancher who had lost his wife to a sudden heart attack, leaving him with 3 small children. It was the kind of tragedy that made the whole community want to help. But help could only go so far. "I keep thinking there must be something we can do," Pastor Williams said. "Those children need stability and Robert needs support." That night Helen couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about those 3 motherless children, about their father trying to hold everything together alone. She knew what it felt like to have your world fall apart. She knew what it felt like to feel completely helpless. But she also knew what it felt like to want to help. The next morning, she found Pastor Williams in his office. "Pastor," she said, knocking on the doorframe, "could I talk to you about something?" He looked up from his sermon notes and smiled. Pastor Williams was in his 50s with kind eyes and gray hair that always looked a little messy. He had been nothing but gentle with Helen since she had arrived at the church, asking for help. "Of course, Helen, please." Sit down. She perched on the edge of the chair across from his desk, suddenly nervous about what she was going to say. I heard you talking yesterday about the Mitchell family, she began. Oh. Pastor Williams looked a little embarrassed. I'm sorry you overheard that. We weren't gossiping, just trying to figure out how to help. No, it's okay. I'm glad I heard. Helen took a deep breath. I was wondering, I know this might sound crazy, but could I help them? Pastor Williams studied her face carefully. What do you mean? Well, I don't have anywhere to go after this week. I don't have money for rent or anything. But I know how to take care of children. I used to babysit all the time when I was younger. And I can cook and clean, and I just thought maybe... She trailed off, suddenly feeling foolish. What was she thinking? She was a childless woman who had just lost everything. What could she possibly offer this family? But Pastor Williams was nodding slowly. You know, Helen, that's not crazy at all. In fact, it might be exactly what both of you need. Do you really think so? I think, Pastor Williams said carefully, that sometimes God works in ways we don't expect. You need a place to belong, and Robert needs help with his family. Maybe this is meant to be. But what if he doesn't want me? What if the children don't like me? What if I mess everything up? Pastor Williams leaned forward. Helen, you've been through one of the hardest things a person can go through, and you're still thinking about how to help others. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. 2 days later, Helen found herself standing on the porch of the Mitchell farmhouse, her few remaining possessions in a single suitcase at her feet. The house was bigger than she had expected. 2 stories with white siding and a wraparound porch that needed painting. There were children's toys scattered in the yard and a tire swing hanging from an old oak tree. Pastor Williams had called ahead to arrange the meeting. Robert Mitchell had agreed to talk, though he had sounded hesitant on the phone. Helen knocked on the front door, her heart beating so fast she was sure whoever answered would be able to hear it. The door opened, and she found herself face to face with a tall man with dark hair and tired eyes. He was probably around her age, maybe a little younger, with the kind of hands that came from working outside every day. Mrs. Carter? He asked. Helen, please, she said, offering a small smile. I'm Robert. Please come in. The inside of the house told the story of a family trying their best without quite succeeding. The living room was clean but cluttered, with children's drawings taped to the walls and a basket of unfolded laundry on the sofa. Helen could see the kitchen beyond, where dishes were stacked by the sink and school backpacks sat on the table. Coffee? Robert asked. That would be nice. They sat at the kitchen table, both of them uncertain how to begin this strange conversation. Pastor Williams explained your situation, Robert said finally. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. I'm sorry about yours too. And about your mother-in-law. How is she doing? The surgery went well, but recovery will be long. She's been everything to us since Catherine died. I honestly don't know how we're going to manage without her. Helen nodded. It's hard when the person who holds everything together isn't there anymore. Something in her voice made Robert look at her more carefully. Your husband was that person for you? In many ways, yes. Michael was my anchor. When he got sick, I thought I was taking care of him. But really, he was still taking care of me. After he died, I realized I didn't know how to do anything on my own. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, 2 people who understood loss in ways they never wanted to. Can I ask you something? Robert said. Of course, but why do you want to help us? You don't even know us. Helen had been asking herself the same question. I think, she said slowly, because I know what it's like to feel lost, and maybe helping your family would help me feel useful again. Just then, the front door burst open and 3 children tumbled into the kitchen, backpacks flying and voices talking over each other. Dad? Ben threw his sandwich at lunch and got in trouble. A little girl with pigtails was saying, I didn't throw it, it fell, protested a boy who was clearly her twin. Both of you threw food, said an older girl with serious brown eyes, and you both need to apologize. The children stopped talking when they saw Helen sitting at their kitchen table. Kids, Robert said. This is Mrs. Carter. Helen, we're talking about her maybe coming to help us out for a while. The older girl stepped forward. I'm Annie, she said politely. These are the twins, Ben and Lily. It's very nice to meet you all, Helen said softly. Ben, who had been hiding behind his sister, peered around at her. Are you going to live here? We're just talking about it, Robert said quickly. But Lily had already moved closer to Helen. "Do you know how to make cookies?" she asked. Helen smiled, her first real smile in days. "I do. I know how to make chocolate chip cookies and oatmeal cookies and sugar cookies with frosting." "Can you braid hair?" Annie asked, touching her own tangled ponytail. "Yes, I can do that too." "What about scary dreams?" Ben asked, coming out from behind his sister. Grandma Rose always knew what to do about scary dreams. Helen's heart broke a little at the hope in these children's eyes. They had lost so much already. What if she couldn't be what they needed? But then she looked at Robert, saw the exhaustion in his face and the worry in his eyes, and she knew she had to try, I think, she said carefully, that scary dreams are one of my specialties. Robert was watching the interaction between Helen and his children with amazement. In 5 minutes, she had them talking and smiling in a way they hadn't since Rose's accident. "Would you like to see the room?" he asked. "If you decide to stay, I mean. It's not much, but it's clean and private." Helen followed him upstairs to a small bedroom with a slanted ceiling and a window that looked out over the hayfields. It was simple but comfortable, with a single bed, a dresser, and a small desk. "It's perfect," she said, and meant it. The job wouldn't be easy, Robert warned. 3 kids, cooking, cleaning, helping with homework. And I can't pay much beyond room and board. "I'm not looking for easy," Helen said. "I'm looking for purpose." That evening, after Helen had helped with dinner and supervised homework and read bedtime stories, she and Robert sat on the front porch watching the sun set over the ranch. "They like you," Robert said. "They're wonderful children. You should be proud. I try my best, but it never feels like enough." Helen understood that feeling completely. "Maybe," she said quietly, "we don't have to do everything alone." Robert looked at her. This quiet woman who had appeared in his life at exactly the moment he needed help most. "So you'll stay?" Helen nodded, feeling something she hadn't felt in months. "Hope. I'll stay." Helen's first morning at the Mitchell Ranch started at 5:30, with the sound of roosters crowing and Robert's boots on the kitchen floor below her room. She lay in bed for a moment, disoriented by the unfamiliar sounds and smells of farm life. For 20 years she had woken up in the same bedroom, reaching across the bed for Michael's warm hand. Now she was alone in a small room above a stranger's kitchen, about to take care of children she had just met. What had she gotten herself into? Downstairs, she found Robert at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a pile of bills. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway, dressed and ready for whatever the day might bring. "Morning," he said quietly. "You're up early. I heard you moving around. I thought I should start learning your routine." Robert studied her face. "Helen, are you sure about this? Yesterday, when you said yes, you seemed certain, but now I'm terrified," she admitted, pouring herself coffee from the pot on the counter. "But that doesn't mean I want to change my mind." The children woke up an hour later and Helen got her first real taste of what she had signed up for. Ben couldn't find his favorite shirt and refused to wear anything else. Lily spilled orange juice all over the table and started crying because she thought she was in trouble. Annie tried to help clean up the mess while simultaneously braiding her own hair and packing her backpack. "It's okay, sweetie," Helen said, kneeling down next to Lily. "Accidents happen. See, it wipes right up." "Grandma Rose never got mad about spills either," Lily said, sniffling. Helen's heart squeezed. These children were comparing her to the woman who had been their rock for 2 years. How could she possibly measure up? "Grandma Rose sounds like she was very special," Helen said gently. "She was the best," Annie said, looking at Helen with a mixture of hope and suspicion. "She made pancakes shaped like animals and always remembered to cut the crusts off our sandwiches." "I like crusts," Ben announced, appearing in the kitchen wearing his favorite dinosaur shirt, which Helen noticed had a stain on the front. "That's good," Helen said. "More crusts for you." Getting the children ready for school was like conducting an orchestra where none of the musicians knew the same song. Annie was responsible and organized, but tried to do too much. Ben was easily distracted and kept forgetting things. Lily was sweet but moved at her own pace, stopping to pet the cat or look at interesting rocks. Helen found herself thinking about her friend Carol, who had 3 children of her own. "It's like herding cats," Carol used to say, "but somehow you love every chaotic minute of it." Helen was beginning to understand what she meant. After the school bus pulled away, Robert showed her around the house properly. The kitchen was the heart of everything. with a large table that seated 8 and windows that looked out over the front pasture. The living room had comfortable worn furniture and shelves lined with books and family photos. Helen paused at a picture of Robert and a beautiful woman with dark hair and laughing eyes, surrounded by 3 much younger children. "That's Catherine," Robert said softly. "That was taken about 6 months before she died. She was lovely," Helen said. "She looked so happy." She was. "We both were." Robert picked up the photo, running his thumb over the glass. "She loved this house, this life. She used to say that all she ever wanted was to fill this place with love and laughter." Helen could feel the weight of that statement. This house had been filled with love and laughter once. Now it felt like everyone was just trying to survive. What was she like? Helen asked. Robert smiled, and for a moment his whole face changed. Funny, always laughing at something. She could find the bright side of anything. When the roof leaked, she put buckets out and told the kids we were having an indoor rain party. When the power went out during a blizzard, she made up stories about snow fairies. The children must miss her terribly. They do. Annie especially. She remembers the most. Robert set the photo back on the shelf. "Some days I worry that I'm failing them, that they're growing up too serious, too worried. Catherine would have known how to keep their childhood magical." Helen spent the rest of the morning exploring the house and making mental lists. The laundry room was overflowing with clothes that needed washing and folding. The pantry was mostly empty except for boxes of cereal and canned soup. The children's rooms were cluttered but not dirty, showing signs of people who were trying but overwhelmed. When she went upstairs to make her bed, she found Ben's dinosaur pajamas on the floor outside his room, and Lily's school shoes in the hallway. Annie's room was the neatest, but even there, Helen could see the signs of a little girl trying to be too grown up too fast. At lunchtime, she walked to the grocery store in town, making her first shopping list for the Mitchell family. She had no idea what these children liked to eat, what Robert needed for lunches, what would work with their budget. But she could start with basics and learn as she went. The store was small, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else. Helen was acutely aware that people were watching her, probably wondering who she was and what she was doing buying groceries with Robert Mitchell's money. "You must be the woman staying with the Mitchells," said the cashier, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. "Yes, I'm Helen. I'm Patricia. My daughter goes to school with Annie. Sweet girl, that one. Very responsible." "She is," Helen agreed. "Those children have been through so much. It's good that Robert has some help now." Patricia smiled as she bagged the groceries. "Welcome to Cedar Ridge." When the children came home from school, Helen had cookies cooling on the counter and homework supplies set out on the kitchen table. She had also found Annie's favorite hair ribbons in the laundry and put them on her dresser, located Ben's missing library book under the couch cushions, and discovered that Lily liked to collect interesting leaves by cleaning out her backpack. "It smells like Grandma Rose's kitchen," Lily said, climbing onto a chair to get closer to the cookies. "Can I have one?" Ben asked. "After homework?" Helen said automatically, then worried she was being too strict. "But maybe just one now wouldn't hurt." Annie hung back, watching as Helen helped Ben with his math worksheet and listened to Lily practice reading. Helen could feel the older girl's eyes on her, evaluating, comparing. "Do you need help with anything?" Helen asked her. "I always do my homework by myself," Annie said. "Okay, but if you change your mind, I'm here." Later, while the children played outside, Helen started dinner. She had planned something simple, spaghetti with meat sauce and a salad, but she found herself wanting to make it special somehow. She remembered Michael always saying that food made with love tasted better than anything else. Robert came in just as she was setting the table, dirty from a day of ranch work but smiling when he saw the scene in his kitchen. "This looks amazing," he said. "It's just spaghetti. It's the first real dinner we've had in weeks." During the meal, Helen learned more about each child's personality. Ben was a talker who told elaborate stories about his day, mixing truth and imagination in equal measure. Lily was quieter but observed everything, often making surprisingly wise comments. Annie was the family manager, reminding everyone about upcoming school events and making sure her siblings had everything they needed. "Mrs. Patterson said we're going to start a unit on family history next week," Annie announced. "We have to interview someone older and write about their life." "You could interview me," Robert suggested. "I was thinking maybe I could interview Grandma Rose when she's feeling better. She knows lots of stories about when Mom was little." Helen saw Robert's face fall slightly. Rose was getting better, but slowly. She wouldn't be coming home for weeks yet, and when she did, she wouldn't be the same energetic grandmother who had been the center of this family. "That's a wonderful idea," Helen said, "but maybe you could interview your dad too, just in case. I bet he has some interesting stories." After dinner, Helen supervised bath time while Robert went back outside to check on the cattle. She had forgotten how much work it was to get 3 children clean and ready for bed. Lily needed help washing her hair. Ben had somehow gotten dirt between his toes despite wearing shoes all day. Annie wanted to do everything herself but still needed someone to make sure she actually used soap. By 8 o'clock, all 3 children were in their pajamas and gathered in the living room for story time. This had been Grandma Rose's tradition, Helen learned, and the children clearly expected her to continue it. "What would you like me to read?" Helen asked, looking at the pile of books they had brought her. "Grandma Rose always let us pick," Lily said. They settled on a story about a family of bears, with Ben curled up against Helen's left side and Lily on her right. Annie sat in the chair across from them, still maintaining some distance but listening intently. Helen had read to children before, but never to children who were testing whether she could fill the shoes of someone they loved. She tried to do the voices the way she imagined Grandma Rose might have, tried to pause at the exciting parts and smile at the funny ones. When she finished the story, Ben was half asleep against her shoulder. "Will you read another one tomorrow?" Lily asked. "If you want me to." "I want you to," Ben mumbled without opening his eyes. Annie just nodded, but Helen counted that as progress. After the children were in bed, Helen found Robert in the kitchen going over paperwork again. 3 weeks into her stay at the Mitchell Ranch, Helen discovered that healing came in small moments when you least expected it. She was in the kitchen making lunch when Lily wandered in, dragging her favorite stuffed rabbit behind her. "Helen?" Lily's voice was small and uncertain. "Yes, sweetheart. Do you think my mommy would be mad that I like you?" Helen's hands stilled on the sandwich she was making. She turned around and knelt down so she was at eye level with the 6-year-old. "Oh, Lily, why would you think that?" Lily's bottom lip quivered. "Because Daddy says Mommy is watching us from heaven, and what if she sees me laughing with you and thinks I forgot about her?" Helen's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. She pulled Lily into a gentle hug, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. "Can I tell you something about moms?" Helen said softly. Lily nodded against her shoulder. "Moms want their children to be happy more than anything else in the whole world. If your mommy is watching from heaven, I think she's smiling because you're laughing again. She's not mad, she's grateful that someone is here to take care of her precious little girl." "Really?" "Really, and you know what else? You could never forget your mommy. She's part of you. Every time you're kind to your brothers or help your daddy or give the best hugs in the world, you're showing everyone how well she loved you." That afternoon, Ben came home from school with tears in his eyes and a note from his teacher. He had gotten in trouble for not paying attention in reading class, and Mrs. Patterson had written that he was falling behind the other students. "I'm stupid," Ben announced, throwing his backpack on the floor and crossing his arms. "Benjamin Mitchell, you are not stupid," Robert said firmly, but Helen could see the worry in his eyes. Ben had been struggling with reading since before she arrived, but it seemed to be getting worse instead of better. "Then why can't I read like Annie?" Ben demanded. "Why do all the words look funny?" Helen had been watching Ben try to do his homework over the past few weeks, and she had noticed something. He was a bright child with a vivid imagination, but letters seemed to dance around on the page for him. Words that he knew perfectly well when he heard them became impossible puzzles when he tried to read them. "Can I show you something?" Helen asked, sitting down next to Ben at the kitchen table. She took a piece of paper and wrote his name in large, clear letters. "What does this say?" Ben squinted at the paper, his face scrunching up in concentration. "Beesby." "I don't know." Helen turned the paper upside down. "How about now?" "Ben," he said immediately. "It says Ben." Helen looked at Robert, who was watching with interest. "Sometimes," Helen said carefully, "our brains just work differently. That doesn't make us stupid. It makes us special." "What do you mean?" "Well, you tell the most amazing stories I've ever heard. You can remember every single dinosaur name and what they ate and where they lived. You can build things with blocks that look like real buildings. Those are all very smart things to do." Ben looked skeptical. "But I can't read." "Yet," Helen said. You can't read yet, but I think we can find ways to help your brain learn letters the same way it learns everything else. That evening, after the children were in bed, Helen found Robert on the front porch, staring out at the darkening sky. "Penny, for your thoughts?" she asked, settling into the chair beside him. "I should have noticed," Robert said quietly. "About Ben, I mean. I should have seen that he was struggling more than just normal kid stuff. You're not a teacher, and you've had a lot on your mind. That's no excuse. I'm his father." Helen was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Michael used to tell me that being a parent wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up and loving your children and doing your best with what you know at the time." Michael sounds like he was a wise man. He was. He would have loved your children. Helen smiled in the darkness. He always wanted kids of our own, but it just never happened for us. He used to joke that maybe God was saving all our parenting energy for something special. Do you miss him? I know that's a silly question, but every day. But it's different now. The missing used to feel like drowning. Now it feels more like he's still part of my story, just in a different chapter. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the first stars appear in the sky. "Can I ask you something?" Robert said. "Of course. What made you want to help us? I mean, really, you could have gone anywhere, done anything. Why choose to take care of someone else's children?" Helen thought about the question. Over the past few weeks, she had asked herself the same thing many times. "I think," she said slowly, "because taking care of your children is teaching me how to take care of myself. When I make them lunch, I remember to eat. When I read them stories, I remember that there are still beautiful things in the world. When I help with homework, I remember that I know things worth sharing. You've been good for them, for all of us. They've been good for me too." The next week brought new challenges and new discoveries. Annie came home with a school project about family trees, and Helen found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a blank piece of paper. "Stuck?" Helen asked. "I don't know what to write about Grandma Rose. Is she still part of our family if she can't live here anymore? And what about Mom? She's dead, but she's still our mom, right?" Helen sat down next to Annie, looking at the complicated diagram the teacher had provided. "What do you think family means?" Helen asked. Annie frowned, thinking hard. "People who love you? That sounds right to me. So if Grandma Rose loves you and you love her, she's still family even if she's not living here. And if your mom loved you and you love her, she's still family even though she's in heaven. What about you?" Annie asked quietly. "Are you family?" The question caught Helen off guard. She had been thinking of herself as a helper, a temporary solution to a problem. But over the past month, these children had become so much more to her than just a job. "I'd like to be," Helen said honestly. Annie nodded solemnly. "I think you are. Different from Mom and Grandma Rose, but still family." That weekend, Helen decided to tackle the project of organizing the children's rooms. She started with Ben's, which looked like a tornado had hit a toy store. As she sorted through clothes and books and dinosaur figures, she found a photo album shoved under his bed. It was filled with pictures of the family from before Catherine died. Page after page of birthday parties and Christmas mornings and ordinary moments that had seemed unimportant at the time, but now looked precious. Helen found herself studying Catherine's face, trying to understand the woman whose place she was somehow filling. Catherine looked young and happy in every photo. She was clearly the kind of mother who got down on the floor to play, who didn't mind grass stains and messy hair, who made every day feel like an adventure. In one picture, she was covered in flour, laughing as baby Ben tried to help her bake cookies. In another, she was braiding Annie's hair, both of them making silly faces at the camera. "That's my favorite picture of Mom," Annie said from the doorway. Helen looked up, startled. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to snoop. I was just organizing and I found this. It's okay." Annie came into the room and sat on Ben's bed next to Helen. "I like looking at them sometimes, but it makes Daddy sad." "It doesn't make you sad?" Annie tilted her head, considering. "A little. But mostly it makes me remember how happy we used to be. Daddy thinks we can't be happy anymore because Mom isn't here, but I think she would want us to be happy." The wisdom of this 8-year-old girl took Helen's breath away. "I think you're right," Helen said softly. "Do you want to see my favorite one?" Annie flipped through the pages until she found what she was looking for. It was a picture of Catherine reading to all 3 children, crowded together on the living room couch. Everyone was in pajamas and Catherine was making an exaggerated surprised face at whatever was happening in the story. She did all the voices when she read to us, Annie said. She made the dragon sound really scary and the princess sound brave. I bet you remember some of those voices, Helen said. I do. Annie looked up at her. Maybe sometime I could help you with story time. I could do the voices I remember and you could do the new ones. I would love that. That evening, Helen was folding laundry in the living room when Robert came in from his evening chores. He stopped when he saw the photo album open on the coffee table. The kids found it, Helen explained. I hope that's okay. Annie wanted to show me some pictures. Robert picked up the album, looking at the photo of Catherine reading to the children. She was magic at story time, he said. She could make any book come alive, Annie remembers. She offered to help me with the voices. Robert smiled, and Helen was surprised to see that it wasn't a sad smile. Catherine would love that. She always said the best gift we could give the kids was to keep the happy memories alive. She sounds like she was an amazing mother. She was. But you know what? So are you. Helen felt tears prick her eyes. I'm not their mother. No, Robert said gently. But you're mothering them, and they need that so much. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Helen sat in her room writing in the journal she had started keeping. She wrote about Ben's breakthrough with reading when she let him trace letters in sand. She wrote about Lily's excitement when Helen taught her to braid her doll's hair. She wrote, 2 months after Helen had first knocked on the Mitchell family's door, she was standing in the kitchen at 5 in the morning, mixing pancake batter and humming softly to herself. It had become her favorite time of day, these quiet moments before the house came alive with the chaos of 3 children getting ready for school. She had just flipped the first batch of pancakes when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Expecting to see Robert coming down for his morning coffee, she was surprised when Annie appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas but wide awake. You're up early. Sweetie? Helen said. I couldn't sleep. Annie climbed onto one of the kitchen chairs, tucking her feet under her. Helen, can I ask you something? Of course, are you going to stay forever? The question hit Helen right in the chest. Over the past weeks, she had begun to think of this place as home, these children as her family. But she hadn't talked to anyone about the future, about what forever might look like. Why do you ask? Because Tommy Patterson's mom got remarried last month and his new stepdad adopted him. Tommy says it's weird at first, but good weird. Like having extra love instead of different love. Helen set down her spatula and gave Annie her full attention. At 8 years old, this little girl was processing complex emotions that many adults struggled with. Do you think your daddy and I should get married? Helen asked gently. Annie shrugged, but Helen could see she had given this serious thought. I think you love each other. Not the same way Daddy loved Mom, but a different good way. And I think you love us kids too. Real love, not just taking care of us love. The wisdom of this child never stopped amazing Helen. You're right, Helen said softly. I do love all of you. Very much. So will you stay? I want to, but grown-up decisions are complicated sometimes. Because of money? Helen blinked, surprised. What do you know about money? I know Daddy worries about it. I hear him on the phone sometimes talking about bills and the ranch and stuff. And I know we can't afford to pay you like a real job. Helen knelt down so she was eye level with Annie. Sweetheart, money isn't the important thing here. What matters is whether we all want to be a family together. I want to, Annie said immediately. Ben and Lily want to too. We talked about it. You did? Ben said you're the best hugger after Grandma Rose and Mom. Lily said you make the house smell happy again. And I said you help Daddy smile more. Helen felt tears threatening. What about Grandma Rose? She's your real family. Grandma Rose will always be our grandma, but she can't take care of us anymore like she used to. She told Daddy on the phone last week that she's glad we have you now. That afternoon, Helen was at the grocery store when she ran into Patricia, the cashier who had been kind to her on her first day in town. But Patricia wasn't alone. She was with 2 other women who Helen recognized but had never formally met. Helen, Patricia called out. I want you to meet Linda and Joyce. Linda runs the 4-H club that Annie just joined, and Joyce teaches the twins' Sunday school class. It's so nice to meet you both, Helen said, suddenly conscious that she was being evaluated by the community. We've heard wonderful things about you, Linda said warmly, Annie is such a delight in 4-H. She talks about you all the time. She does? Oh yes, Joyce chimed in. Last Sunday, Ben told the whole class about how you helped him build a dinosaur habitat for his school project. And Lily drew a picture of your garden and said you were teaching her about flowers. Helen felt a warm glow of pride. They're amazing children. They are, Linda agreed. And they're lucky to have you. We were all so worried about Robert after Catherine died. And then when Rose had her accident, well, let's just say the whole community has been praying for that family. It seems like those prayers were answered, Patricia added, giving Helen a meaningful look that evening. Robert came in from his work to find Helen teaching Ben and Lily how to make homemade pizza, while Annie worked on her homework at the kitchen table. The scene was so domestic, so perfectly normal, that he had to stop in the doorway for a moment just to appreciate it. "Daddy," Lily called out, flour in her hair and tomato sauce on her cheek. "Look what we made." "I see that. It looks delicious." "Helen let us put our own toppings on," Ben added, proudly showing off his creation, which appeared to have every available ingredient piled on top. "Mine has pepperoni and cheese and olives and mushrooms and ham and pineapple." "That's quite a combination," Robert said, catching Helen's amused expression. "I told him he could put whatever he wanted on his section." Helen explained, "We're calling it the Ben Special." During dinner, the children chattered about their day at school, their upcoming 4-H projects, and their plans for the weekend. Helen watched Robert's face as he listened to his children, saw how relaxed he looked, how present he was. When she had first arrived, meal times had felt hurried and stressful. Now they felt like celebrations. "Mrs. Patterson said there's going to be a fall festival at school next month," Annie announced. "Parents can come and there will be games and food and a cakewalk." "That sounds fun," Robert said. "We should all go. Can Helen come too?" Lily asked. "Of course," Robert said without hesitation. "Helen's part of our family." The words hung in the air for a moment, and Helen felt something shift inside her chest. Part of the family. Not the housekeeper, not the helper, but part of the family. After the children went to bed, Helen found Robert in his office, working on ranch paperwork. She knocked on the doorframe and he looked up with a smile. "The kids asleep?" "Finally." Ben insisted on 3 stories tonight. "He's been doing that more lately. I think he's testing to see if you'll get tired of reading to him." Helen sat down in the chair across from his desk. "Robert, can we talk about something?" "Sure, what's on your mind?" Helen took a deep breath. "This morning Annie asked me if I was going to stay forever. And today at the store I met some of the other parents from school and church. They all talked about me like I belonged here. Like I was really part of your family." Robert set down his pen and gave her his full attention. "The thing is," Helen continued, "I've been thinking about that a lot lately. About belonging here. About what that would mean. And I love it here, Robert. I love your children like they were my own. I love this house, this life, this community. But I don't want to assume anything. I don't want to push myself into places where I'm not wanted." Robert was quiet for a long moment, and Helen felt her heart sink. Maybe she had misread the situation. Maybe he was just grateful for the help but didn't want anything permanent. "Helen," he said finally, "can I tell you something?" She nodded. "When Catherine died, I thought my life was over. Not literally, obviously, but the life I had planned, the future I had imagined. I figured I would just focus on raising the kids and keeping the ranch running. And that would be enough." He paused, running his hand through his hair. "But these past 2 months, watching you with Annie and Ben and Lily, seeing how you've made this house feel like a home again, I've started to believe that maybe there could be more. Maybe we could have a different kind of family, but still a real family." Helen felt her heart start to beat faster. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I want you to stay forever too. Not as the housekeeper or the babysitter, but as, well, as whatever we want to call it. Partner, wife, mom to my kids, family." Helen stared at him, hardly believing what she was hearing. "Are you asking me to marry you?" Robert laughed nervously. "I guess I am. Not very romantically, sitting here in my office surrounded by cattle breeding records and tax forms. But yes, I think I am. Robert, I know it's not a traditional love story," he said quickly. "I know we're not teenagers falling head over heels, but what we have feels solid, real, built on respect and friendship and caring about the same things." Helen thought about Michael, about the passionate, all-consuming love they had shared. That had been beautiful and perfect and exactly what she had needed at that time in her life. But this was different. This was about building something together, about choosing each other and choosing this family every single day. The children, she said, would be thrilled. Annie's been dropping hints for weeks. Yesterday Ben asked me if it would be okay if he started calling you Mom instead of Helen. Helen felt tears spill over. He did? He did. And Lily asked if you getting married to me would mean you couldn't leave anymore. What did you tell them? I told them we'd have to see what you wanted. Helen looked around Robert's office at the family photos on his desk, at the window that looked out over the ranch where she had learned to gather eggs from the chickens and help with feeding the cattle. She thought about her small room upstairs that had become her sanctuary, about the children who had become her heart, about the man who had given her a chance to belong somewhere again. I want to stay, she said softly. I want to be part of this family forever. Robert's face broke into the biggest smile she had seen from him since she'd arrived. Really? Really? Yes, I'll marry you, Robert Mitchell. And yes, I'll be mom to those beautiful children. And yes, I'll help you run this ranch and raise this family and build something beautiful together. Robert came around the desk and pulled her into a hug that felt like coming home. Catherine would approve, he said softly. She always said that love multiplies, it doesn't divide. There's room in this family for all the love we can. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in October, just as Helen was packing lunches for the children. She almost didn't answer it, thinking it might be another telemarketer, but something made her pick up the receiver. Helen, this is Dorothy. Dorothy Carter, Michael's sister. Helen's hands went still on Annie's sandwich. She hadn't spoken to Michael's sister since the funeral, and before that they had only met a handful of times. Dorothy lived in Portland and had never been particularly close to her brother. Dorothy, this is unexpected. How are you? I'm well, thank you. Listen, Helen, I know we haven't kept in touch, but I've been thinking about you. How are you managing? Are you still in that little house? Helen glanced around the Mitchell kitchen where Annie was helping Lily find her library book, while Ben searched for his favorite pencil. Actually, I'm not. I had to. Things changed after Michael died. Oh no, I was afraid of that. Medical bills? Among other things, yes. Well, that's actually why I'm calling. I have some news that might help. Do you remember Michael's friend from college, David Wong? He started that tech company. Helen vaguely remembered Michael mentioning someone from his college days who had done well in business. But she couldn't recall the details, sort of. Well, his company just went public, and apparently he's been looking for ways to give back. He remembered Michael fondly and learned about your situation through mutual friends. Helen, he wants to offer you a job. Helen sank into one of the kitchen chairs. A job. A good job. Communications director for his foundation. It would be based here in Portland, and the salary, well, it would be more money than you've probably ever seen. Real financial security, Helen. A chance to start over properly. Helen felt like the world had tilted sideways. I don't understand. Why would he offer me a job? I don't have experience in communications or foundations. He said Michael always talked about how smart you were, how good you were with people. And honestly, I think he feels guilty that he lost touch with Michael during the illness. This is his way of honoring your husband's memory. Annie appeared at Helen's elbow, tugging on her sleeve. Helen, the bus will be here in 5 minutes. Helen nodded distractedly, then realized Dorothy was still talking. Would need an answer fairly soon. The position starts in January, which gives you time to relocate. I could help you find an apartment, get settled. Think about it, Helen. A real career independence. A chance to build your own life instead of just surviving. After Helen hung up, she went through the motions of getting the children off to school, but her mind was spinning. A job offer. Good money. A fresh start in a new city where no one knew her as the widow who had lost everything. She tried to focus on her morning routine, making beds, starting laundry, planning dinner. But Dorothy's words kept echoing in her head. Your own life instead of just surviving. Was that what she was doing here? Just surviving? That afternoon when the children came home from school, Helen found herself watching them with new eyes. Ben bounced through the door full of excitement about the pumpkin they were growing in the school garden. Lily carefully showed Helen the star stickers she had earned for good behavior. Annie, ever responsible, handed over permission slips that needed to be signed and reminded Helen about the parent-teacher conferences next week. These weren't her children, Helen thought suddenly. She loved them desperately, but they weren't hers by blood or by law. Robert wasn't her husband yet. This wasn't really her life. It was a life she had borrowed, a family she had joined out of mutual need. Helen, you look sad, Lily observed, climbing onto Helen's lap as she sat at the kitchen table. Are you sick? No, sweetheart. Just thinking about some grown-up stuff. Is it boring grown-up stuff or scary grown-up stuff? Helen couldn't help but smile. A little of both, I think. That evening, after the children were in bed, Helen found herself pacing the living room instead of joining Robert on the porch as she usually did. When he came looking for her, she was standing by the mantel, looking at the family photos that had become so familiar. You're quiet tonight, he said. Everything okay? Helen turned to face him. This man who had become so dear to her, who had offered her a place in his family when she had nowhere else to go. I got a phone call today, from my late husband's sister. Robert's face became careful, neutral. Okay, she has a job offer for me. A good job in Portland. Communications director for a foundation. The salary would be... Helen paused, trying to find the right words. It would be more than I ever made before Michael got sick. Robert was very still. That sounds like an amazing opportunity. It is. It would mean financial security, independence, a chance to have my own career, my own life. Your own life, Robert repeated quietly. Helen heard the hurt in his voice and felt her heart break a little. Robert, I didn't ask for this. I never expected... When would you start? January. If I took it... If... Robert sat down heavily in his favorite chair. Helen, can I ask you something? Of course, and have you been unhappy here? Have we? Have I been taking advantage of your situation? Expecting you to play house with us when what you really wanted was to rebuild your own life? The questions hit Helen like physical blows. No, Robert, no, that's not... You haven't taken advantage of anything. I've been happier here than I thought I could ever be again. Then why are you considering this job? It was a fair question and Helen wasn't sure she knew the answer. Because it's safe, she said finally. Because it's mine. Because no one could take it away from me. And you think this could be taken away? Helen gestured around the living room at the life she had built with this family. It's not really mine, is it? I mean, yes, you asked me to marry you, and yes, the children love me. But what if you changed your mind? What if something happened to you? What if the children decided they didn't need me anymore? I would have nothing again. Robert was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but sad. Is that really what you think? That our love for you is conditional? That our commitment to you isn't real? I don't know what I think, Helen admitted. 6 months ago, I thought I had a secure life with Michael, and then everything fell apart. I lost my husband, my home, my entire identity. The only reason I'm here is because I had nowhere else to go. That's not true, isn't it? If I hadn't lost everything, would I have ever knocked on your door? Would I have ever considered marrying you? The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Robert stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the ranch he had built his life around. Maybe not, he said finally. But Helen, most people don't get to choose the circumstances that bring them together. My grandparents met because their families arranged their marriage. My parents met because my mom's car broke down outside my dad's garage. Catherine and I met because we both got food poisoning at the same college party and ended up in the campus health center together. He turned back to face her. The circumstances don't matter. What matters is what we choose to build together once we find each other. Helen felt tears sliding down her cheeks. But what if I'm making the wrong choice? What if I'm staying because I'm scared to be alone? Not because I really want to be here. Only you can answer that, Robert said softly. But Helen, can I tell you what I see when I look at you? She nodded. I see a woman who makes my children laugh, who sits up with Ben when he has nightmares about dinosaurs taking over the world, who teaches Lily how to braid friendship bracelets and listens to all of Annie's worries about whether she's growing up too fast. I see someone who has made this house feel like a home again, who has helped me remember that life can have joy in it even after terrible loss. Robert moved closer to her. I see someone I want to build a future with, not because you're convenient or because we're both broken, but because you make our family better, because you make me better. But the job is a wonderful opportunity that you should absolutely take if it's what you really want. Helen stared at him. You wouldn't fight for me to stay? Helen, if I have to fight to keep you here, then this isn't where you belong. The next few days were torture. Helen went through her usual routines, making breakfast, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories, but everything felt different. She found herself noticing things she had taken for granted. The way Annie automatically set a place for her at the dinner table. How Ben reached for her hand when they crossed the street. How Lily saved her best drawings to show Helen first. She also noticed Robert pulling back slightly, giving her space to make her decision, but creating a distance that hadn't been there before. It made her realize how much she had come to depend on their evening conversations. On the way, he looked at her like she was essential to his world. On Friday afternoon, Helen was folding laundry when Annie appeared in the doorway, her face serious. "Are you going away?" Annie asked without preamble. Helen's hand stilled on Ben's favorite dinosaur shirt. "What makes you ask that?" "You've been sad all week, and Daddy's been sad too. And yesterday I heard him talking to Uncle Jake on the phone about finding someone else to help with us." Helen's heart clenched. Robert's brother Jake lived 3 states away and had his own family. If Robert was calling him, he must be really worried about managing alone. "Come here, sweetheart," Helen said, patting the bed beside her. The blizzard that hit Cedar Ridge in late November was the kind that old-timers would talk about for years afterward. It started on a Wednesday evening with gentle snowflakes that the children pressed their faces against the windows to watch. By Thursday morning, the wind was howling and snow was piling up against the house in drifts that reached the first-floor windows. Helen woke up to complete silence. No humming refrigerator, no furnace kicking on, no radio alarm clock buzzing. The power had gone out sometime during the night. She wrapped herself in a robe and hurried downstairs, where she found Robert already in the kitchen, trying to get the old wood-burning stove working. "How bad is it?" she asked, looking out at the wall of white beyond the kitchen window. "Bad. The power lines are down all over the county. We could be without electricity for days." Helen's first thought was for the children. How would they stay warm? What would they eat? How would they manage without all the modern conveniences they depended on? But as the morning progressed, something magical began to happen. Without television or video games or electronic distractions, the family was forced to slow down and be together in ways they hadn't in months. Robert got the wood stove burning steadily, filling the kitchen with warmth and the comforting smell of burning oak. Helen found candles in the pantry and placed them around the house, creating a soft, golden glow that made everything feel cozy rather than scary. The children woke up to find their house transformed into what Ben immediately declared was like living in the old days, before electricity was invented. Instead of being upset about missing school or not being able to watch their morning cartoons, they were enchanted by the adventure of it all. "Can we make pancakes on the wood stove?" Lily asked, bouncing on her toes with excitement. "I don't see why not," Helen said, though she had never cooked on a wood-burning stove in her life. It might take some experimenting. The experimenting turned into the most fun breakfast they had ever made. Helen and Annie worked together to figure out the hot spots on the stove's surface, while Robert showed Ben and Lily how to keep the fire fed with just the right amount of wood. The first batch of pancakes was a disaster, burned on the bottom and raw in the middle, but everyone laughed so hard that Helen's stomach ached. "These are terrible," Ben announced cheerfully, taking another bite of his mangled pancake. "The worst pancakes in history," agreed Lily. "But there are terrible pancakes," Annie added with a grin. By the second batch, they had figured out the trick of moving the pan around to different spots on the stovetop. The pancakes still weren't perfect, but they were edible. And somehow they tasted better than any pancakes Helen had ever made on a regular stove. After breakfast, with no school to attend and no outside chores possible in the storm, the family settled in the living room around the fireplace that Robert had also gotten burning. Helen had worried that the children would be bored without their usual activities, but instead they seemed to bloom in the quiet, undistracted time. Annie pulled out a deck of cards and taught everyone a game her mother had shown her years ago. Ben found his box of building blocks and constructed an elaborate castle, while telling a story about the brave knights who lived there. Lily curled up next to Helen and asked her to tell stories about when she was a little girl. "Tell us about the time you got in trouble at school," Lily requested. Having heard this story before but never tiring of it, Helen launched into the tale of the day she had brought her pet turtle to second grade for show and tell, only to have it escape and cause chaos in the classroom. As she described 20 children chasing a determined turtle around desks and under chairs, all 3 Mitchell children dissolved into giggles. "Were you scared you'd get in big trouble?" Ben asked. Terrified, Helen admitted. But you know what the teacher said when we finally caught Speedy? What? All three children chorused. Even though they knew the answer, she said that Speedy had taught the class more about problem solving in 10 minutes than she could have taught in a week of regular lessons. I wish we could bring a turtle to school, Ben said wistfully. Absolutely not, Robert said firmly, but he was smiling. As the day wore on, Helen found herself watching her family with a new kind of awareness. Without the usual rush and stress of their normal routine, she could see them all more clearly. Annie was still the responsible oldest child, but in this relaxed atmosphere she allowed herself to be silly in ways Helen rarely saw. Ben's imagination flourished without electronic stimulation, and his stories became more elaborate and creative. Lily, usually the baby of the family, showed surprising wisdom and insight in their conversations, and Robert became playful in a way that Helen suspected he hadn't been since before his first wife died. He got down on the floor to help Ben with his block castle. He let Lily braid tiny braids all over his hair. He told jokes that made everyone groan and laugh at the same time. You know what? Helen said as they sat around the fire that evening, bellies full of soup she had managed to heat on the wood stove. I think this might be the best day we've had since I moved in. Really? Annie asked. Even though we couldn't do anything normal? Especially because we couldn't do anything normal. I know what you mean, Robert said thoughtfully. When was the last time we all just sat together like this for hours? Just talking and playing and being together? None of them could remember. As bedtime approached, Helen realized they had a problem. The upstairs of the house was too cold to sleep in without heat, and the wood stove could only warm the downstairs rooms. Looks like we're all camping in the living room tonight, Robert announced. I'll drag mattresses down for everyone, like a sleepover, Lily exclaimed, clapping her hands. They turned the living room into a giant bedroom, with mattresses and blankets arranged around the fireplace. Helen made hot chocolate on the wood stove, or at least her best approximation of hot chocolate, made with cocoa powder and canned milk, and they told ghost stories by candlelight until the younger children started yawning. Helen, Ben said sleepily as she tucked him into his makeshift bed next to the fire. This was the best day ever. Even without TV or video games? Especially without TV or video games, we got to just be together. After the children fell asleep, Helen and Robert sat by the dying fire, speaking in low voices so they wouldn't wake their family. I keep thinking about what Ben said, Helen murmured, about getting to just be together. We are together every day, Robert pointed out, but not like this. Usually we're rushing around, getting kids ready for school, doing chores, managing schedules. When do we ever just sit and talk and laugh together for hours? Robert nodded slowly. You're right. We've been so focused on managing our lives that we forgot to actually live them. Helen shifted closer to him on the couch, grateful for his warmth in the cooling room. I think that's part of why I was so tempted by that job offer. Not because I didn't love being here, but because I felt like I was always reacting to things instead of choosing them, always helping with someone else's crisis instead of creating something positive. And today felt different? Today felt like we were a family by choice, not by necessity. Like we were all here because we wanted to be, not because we had to be. Robert was quiet for a moment, staring into the glowing embers of the fire. Catherine and I used to talk about that sometimes, he said finally, about the difference between going through the motions of family life and actually being present for it. She was better at it than I was. She could make folding laundry feel like a celebration if the kids were helping. She sounds like she was an amazing woman. She was. But Helen, you know what I realized today? What? I haven't thought about what Catherine would think or do or say in weeks. For the longest time after she died, every decision I made was filtered through, what would Catherine want? But somewhere along the way I stopped asking that question. Helen felt her heart speed up. Is that bad? No, Robert said, turning to face her fully. It's good. It means I'm not trying to recreate the past anymore. I'm trying to build something new, with me. With you. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire slowly die down to glowing coals. Robert, Helen said quietly, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. Okay. Do you think you would have fallen in love with me if we had met under different circumstances? If I hadn't been desperate and you hadn't needed help with the children, Robert considered the question seriously, the way he considered all important questions. I don't know, he said finally. But Helen, I don't think it matters. It doesn't? Every love story starts with circumstances. People meet because they work at the same place or go to the same school, or their friends introduce them, or they both happen to be at the same coffee shop at the same time. The circumstances are just the beginning. What matters is what you choose to do once you've found each other. He reached for her hand in the dim light. I choose you, Helen. Not because you're convenient, not because you're good with my children, not because I need help around the house. I choose you because you make me laugh. Because you listen when I talk about ranch problems that bore everyone else to tears. Because you see the best in my children even when they're being impossible. The wedding took place on a perfect April morning, 6 months after the blizzard that had changed everything. Helen stood in front of the mirror in the small room behind Cedar Ridge Community Church, smoothing down the simple cream-colored dress she had chosen. It wasn't a traditional wedding gown. She was 43 years old and had been married before, but it was perfect for the life she was stepping into. You look beautiful, Annie said from behind her, and Helen turned to see all 3 children dressed in their Sunday best, each holding a small bouquet of spring flowers they had picked from the garden together. So do all of you, Helen said, her voice thick with emotion. Are you ready for this? We've been ready forever, Ben said matter-of-factly. You've been our mom for months already. This is just making it official. Lily nodded seriously. Pastor Williams said after today, no one can ever say we're not a real family. We were always a real family, Annie added. But now everyone will know it. Helen knelt down and pulled all 3 children into a careful hug, trying not to wrinkle their clothes or her dress. I love you all so much, she whispered. Being your mom is the greatest gift I've ever received. Even greater than the job in Portland? Ben asked. Helen laughed. The children knew about the job offer she had turned down, and Ben in particular seemed to take pride in the fact that she had chosen them over what he called all that money, much greater than the job in Portland. A knock on the door interrupted them, and Pastor Williams peeked his head in. Everyone ready? Robert's looking a little nervous out there. He's nervous? Helen asked, surprised. Robert was usually the calmest person she knew. Well, Pastor Williams said with a grin, he told me this morning that he's never been happier about anything in his life. But he's terrified he's going to mess up his vows. Helen had insisted they write their own vows, wanting their words to reflect their unique journey to this moment. She had spent weeks trying to capture everything she felt, everything she wanted to promise, everything this family meant to her. They walked together to the sanctuary doors, Helen and the 3 children who would officially become hers in just a few minutes. Through the glass, Helen could see the small gathering of friends and neighbors who had come to celebrate with them. The church was decorated with simple arrangements of wildflowers and ribbons, and sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, painting everything in jewel tones. But Helen only had eyes for Robert, standing at the altar in his best suit, looking more handsome than she had ever seen him. When their eyes met, his face broke into a smile that made her heart skip. The ceremony began with Pastor Williams welcoming everyone and talking about the nature of love and family. He spoke about how love multiplies rather than divides, how families can be formed in many different ways, and how the commitment they were witnessing today was about much more than just 2 people choosing each other. Then it was time for the vows. Robert went first, his voice strong and clear despite his earlier nerves. Helen, he began, 6 months ago, you came into our lives when we were all struggling to figure out how to be a family without the person who had been our center. You didn't try to replace what we had lost. Instead, you helped us discover what we could build together. He paused, looking at his children and then back at Helen. You taught Annie that it's okay to let someone else take care of things sometimes. You showed Ben that being different isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to celebrate. You helped Lily believe that it was safe to love someone new without forgetting someone who came before. Helen felt tears sliding down her cheeks. And you taught me that the heart has infinite capacity for love. That choosing to build something new doesn't mean dishonoring what came before. That healing doesn't have to mean forgetting. Robert's voice grew stronger. I promise to love you not just as my wife, but as the mother of our children, the partner in our adventures, the keeper of our family's heart. I promise to choose you every day, in the big moments and the small ones when things are easy and when they're hard. I promise to help you remember who you are when grief or fear tries to convince you otherwise, and I promise to build with you a love that's strong enough to hold our whole family, now and always. When it was Helen's turn, she looked out at the faces watching her. Robert's brother, who had flown in from Colorado, Rose from her rehabilitation center looking frailer but beaming with joy. Neighbors who had become friends. Children from school who adored the Mitchell kids. But mostly she looked at Robert and Annie and Ben and Lily, the family that had saved her life by letting her save theirs. "Robert," she began, her voice steady despite the tears. "When I knocked on your door 8 months ago, I thought I was looking for a place to stay. I didn't know I was looking for a place to belong." She smiled at the children. "Annie, Ben, Lily, you three taught me that love doesn't require biology. That being a mother isn't about giving birth to children. It's about choosing to love them fiercely and unconditionally every single day. You taught me that families can be formed by choice and commitment and daily decisions to show up for each other." She turned back to Robert. "And you, Robert, taught me that second chances are real, that it's possible to love again without betraying what you loved before. That healing and happiness don't require forgetting or leaving the past behind, just making room for new chapters in the story." Helen's voice grew stronger, more confident. "I promise to love all 4 of you with my whole heart. I promise to be present for the ordinary moments and the extraordinary ones. I promise to help you remember your mother and honor her memory while we build new memories together. I promise to love this ranch, this community, this life we're creating together." She paused, looking directly into Robert's eyes. "I promise to choose this family every single day, in sunshine and storms, in laughter and tears, in terrible pancakes and perfect moments. I promise to be your wife, your partner, your friend, and I promise to be the mother these children deserve, not because they need someone to take care of them, but because they deserve to be loved completely and unconditionally." After, they exchanged rings, simple bands that Robert's grandmother had worn and that Helen would treasure for the rest of her life. Pastor Williams asked if the children wanted to say anything. They hadn't planned this part, but Annie stepped forward, speaking for all 3 of them. "We want to say that we choose Helen too," she said clearly. "We choose her to be our mom, and we promise to be good kids for her. And we're really happy that she decided to stay with us forever." Ben nodded solemnly. "And we promise to help her when she needs help, just like she helps us, and to love her even when we're in trouble," Lily added, making everyone laugh. When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, and Robert kissed Helen while their children cheered and the small congregation applauded, Helen felt something settle deep in her chest, a sense of rightness, of completion, of being exactly where she belonged. The reception was held at the ranch with tables set up in the backyard and food prepared by half the town. Helen had worried about imposing on people, but the community had insisted on celebrating their new family properly. "This is how we do things in Cedar Ridge," Patricia from the grocery store had told her firmly. "We take care of each other." As the afternoon progressed, Helen found herself moving through the celebration in a kind of blissful dream. She danced with Robert to a song played by the local high school's string quartet. She watched Annie teach the younger children how to make flower crowns. She listened to Ben tell anyone who would listen about how his new mom made the best cookies in the world and helped him with reading so he wasn't scared of books anymore. But the moment that meant the most came when Rose, Robert's mother-in-law, pulled Helen aside for a quiet conversation. "I wanted to talk to you," Rose said, her voice soft but clear. Helen had been nervous about Rose's feelings toward her marriage to Robert. Rose had been Catherine's mother, after all, and Helen had worried that she might see the wedding as a betrayal of her daughter's memory. "I know this might be awkward," Helen began, but Rose held up her hand. "Stop right there. There's nothing awkward about it. I want you to know something, Helen. Catherine would approve of this marriage." Helen felt her eyes fill with tears. "How can you be sure?" "Because I raised her and I know how she thought about love. She always said that love multiplies, it doesn't divide. She would be so grateful that her children have someone who loves them the way you do, and she would be happy that Robert found someone who makes him smile again." Rose reached out and took Helen's hands. "You're not replacing Catherine. You're adding to the love story. You're giving these children what she would want them to have. A mother who chooses them every day, who shows up for them, who helps them grow into good people. Thank you, Helen whispered. That means more to me than you know. And Helen, call me Grandma Rose, because that's what you are now, part of this family in every way that matters. As the sun began to set, the celebration started to wind down. Neighbors helped clean up, friends hugged goodbye, and gradually the ranch grew quiet except for Helen's new family. The children, exhausted from the excitement of the day, fell asleep easily for once. Helen and Robert tucked each of them into bed, kissing.